Hello, welcome to Federal Sector Watch under President Trump 47. I'm presenting some highlights of some ongoing controversies about President Trump's efforts to reshape the federal government. I'm Merrick Masters, Professor of Business Emeritus, commentator, and podcaster. You can find me at my email addresses or at my YouTube channel where this is posted. The topics we'll cover today very briefly involve competing perspectives about the role of government, etc., methods of separating federal employees, which would include firing federal employees, a little bit more about separations at all in the federal sector, the status of DOGE powers under selected court rulings, employee rights under selected rulings about the merit system protections of federal employees, status of certain agency dismissals by President Trump, and a little bit about myself. Competing perspectives. Really, we're in this spot of controversy, which has economic, legal, and political dimensions over President Trump's efforts to revamp the federal sector due to differences of opinion about the role of government, the nature and scope of government in society, including policy, program, employment spending, contracted work, nonprofit extensions, the nonprofits that receive government money to really extend the work of government, and regulatory latitude of independent agencies. We also have differences over the philosophy of government service, which boil down to different perspectives about a spoils system versus a civil service system, and controversy over the separation of powers in branches of government, including the executive branch's control over personnel. There are several methods of separating federal employees from positions to reduce workforce levels. And really what Trump is trying to do is to reduce workforce levels, to reduce the level of spending, and to change the composition of the federal workforce. And you can do this via early retirements, buyouts, reductions in force, terminations of probationary employees, and terminations of non-probationary employees. Employees in various situations that may be affected by this may have certain rights under the Civil Service Reform Act as pertains to their labor representation rights and also the enforcement of so-called merit system protections. Under separations, President Trump has taken dramatic action, most visibly, I think, with respect to the Office of the United States Agency for International Development, in which he has put several hundred or 7,000 employees on administrative leave. This has been challenged, but on February the 21st, Judge Nichols issued an order rejecting a request for a temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction. And as a result of that, these administrative leave attempts or requirements imposed by President Trump are going forward. Also in the area of separations, the president offered federal employees a deferred resignation program, giving them an opportunity to take a buyout for their resignations. Judge O'Toole has refused to grant a preliminary injunction and allowed this to go forward. And here is a list of agencies that have announced or implemented plans to terminate employees. It's a partial list. There's no central repository of information about the status of separation efforts in the administration, whether they be administrative leave, termination of probationary employees, termination of competitive service employees who are not on probationary status, or other actions that may have been taken to reduce the overall level of the federal workforce. But they run across a variety of different departments and sub-agencies. And I'm not attaching specific numbers to them because there's no clear and official state of how many people have actually been impacted by presidential decisions or administrative decisions implementing the president's wishes in this regard. And I don't think it's fair to just throw numbers around that may not be accurate in this context. But there is also indication that in addition to these preliminary steps to shrink the federal workforce, the administration is now considering reductions in force as it had previously announced in an executive order. And the U.S. Office of Management and Budget and the U.S. Office of Personnel Management recently issued a memorandum that said that agencies should prepare reduction in force and reorganization plans, and that these reorganization plans should focus on the maximum elimination of functions that are not statutory mandated while driving the highest quality, most efficient delivery of statutory required functions. And agencies should also seek to consolidate agencies of their organization that are duplicative and consolidate management layers. A federal judge has also upheld, at least temporarily, the constitutionality or the ability of the administration to go ahead with the Department of Government Efficiency, which is the central entity that is driving a lot of these changes to reduce the size of the federal workforce. At the same time, a court has reinstated a government official who is appointed by the previous president to the Office of Special Counsel of the federal government to oversee the merit system protection provisions of the Civil Service Reform Act. And this person who was terminated by President Trump has been reinstated by the courts and issued an appeal to the Merit Systems Protection Board, which was granted, that would overturn the terminations of various federal employees for violating prohibited personnel practices under the Merit System Protection provisions of the Civil Service Reform Act. President Trump has also dismissed appointees to the Federal Labor Relations Authority Board, the Federal Services Impasses Panel, as I mentioned, the Office of Special Counsel, and the Merit Systems Protection Board. These have been challenged to varying degrees on their legality, and a court ruled that President Trump had to reinstate a member of the Merit Systems Protection Board that he terminated recently. And this is pending before the higher courts, which will review this and ultimately determine the constitutionality of the president's actions. There's a lot of turbulence in this environment and a lot of anxiety and concern on the part of federal employees and also on the part of the administration about getting the authority from the courts to move forward on all of these initiatives. We are in really the vortex of an effort to reshape the balance of power between the executive branch and the legislative and judicial branches of the federal government. And this is not an unusual occurrence in the history of the country, but it is one that has profound implications and will have to be sorted through by the courts and the Congress, as well as the president exercising their respective powers. Stay tuned for more episodes and have a good day.